Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Roy Nadler, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my esteemed co-host. We've been doing this since 2008, so have a lot of history and have probably 800 uh, podcasts. We have been listed as the #1 ranking leadership development podcast by FeedSpot, just based on the length that we've been doing this, but also the expertise and the great guests that we have. Today's going to be very interesting. We're going to be talking about AI. And the title of this is Hybrid Intelligence as a Catalyst of Agency Amid AI Artificial Intelligence at Any Age. We have Dr. Cornelia Walther. She is a lawyer, and she says she's going to have a very unique background, and we're going to hear about that. And, between Kathy and I, we've helped thousands of leaders to perform in the top 10%. And that's really what Kathy and I do. We're in, different industries, Kathy with law enforcement and military, myself with a variety of organizations from, finance to agriculture to pharmacies or pharmaceutical. And why do we do this? We want to bring a few tips and tools. If you're our listener as a leader, as a individual, what can you do a little differently that's going to help you be a top performer? What can you do a little more? What can you do a little less? And so we'll pull some of these tips from Cornelia here. And Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to be here today. And I'm coming from sunny Indiana. It's a beautiful day here. You
Yeah.
know, it's for me, it's a special day because I'll tell you a little bit about Cornelia and how we met,
Oh,
some of the work that we're doing together. And she is very unique, and her whole philosophy here on what I say is there is no AI without EI, right? There's no artificial intelligence that is going to serve us in the capacity that we need in the future without some kind of emotional intelligence. And I have to say, Cornelia captivated me at one of the BCC webinars. And I immediately jumped on after the meeting and spoke to her, and have been absolutely enthralled with everything that she posts, everything that she writes. And I am so privileged and honored to be co-authoring a couple of things with Cornelia. She's an amazing human being. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll bring her on. So, Dr. Cornelia Walther is a humanitarian leader with over 20 years at the United Nations, driving global social change. She is now a Wharton University of Pennsylvania fellow, and she's a pioneer on hybrid intelligence and prosocial AI through global POZE. It's an alliance, POZE, that helps to build agency amid artificial intelligence for all human beings who are trying to focus in this industry. And she'll talk more about the POZE Alliance. Her focus is on harnessing any kind of artificial intelligence to bring out the best in all of us for our people and our planet. And this is such a unique and compelling person, and her thoughts and the way she approaches the subject. I have to tell you that I did spend some time with Cornelia in Philadelphia, and I'm looking forward, hopefully, to seeing her before she goes back to Germany. So let me just give everybody her contact information so that as we jump in here, if you hear anything that you'd like to touch on further, you have an opportunity. It's Cornelia C. Walther at gmail.com. And that's Cornelia C. Walther, Walther at gmail.com. Cornelia, thank you so much for your flexibility, for honoring me with your presence. And I know you're going to enjoy Raleigh, and we're just delighted to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Cassie.
well, Kathy, thank you for that. And I know you said you may not make it, and I didn't realize that you were able to hand pick Cornelia, for to kind of tap into her expertise. So I'm excited about that. And so, Cornelia, let's start a little bit with your background, maybe some of the major influences, kind of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've been working for 20 years with UNICEF in humanitarian operations, mostly West Africa, but also Afghanistan and Haiti. And then did indeed do my PhD in law, as you mentioned before, whilst working in Congo, per distance with a university in France. And then worked a year with UNICEF in headquarters, developed their global communication strategy, and then decided it's time for radical change, left, and wrote a first book about POZE, a paradigm for social change via individual transformation, that I had prototyped with social workers whilst working in Haiti, and which looks at human existence as a composition of twice four dimensions with aspirations, emotions, thoughts, and sensations at the individual level, and individuals as part of communities, countries, and the planet at the collective level. And that if we really want to bring about sustainable social change, we need to not only look at each of these dimensions, but start to recognize and influence their interplays. Wrote a first book about that, which led to another one that put POZE in the context of institutional transformation. Then COVID happened, and it seemed like now we need radical systematic change more than ever. So wrote another book about that. And then starting in 2021, became more interested in technology and the potential of technology for positive social change at scale. Wrote about aspirational algorithms before ChatGPT became the name of every game. And then wrote another one about inspiring leadership. And since 2023, I'm at the University of Pennsylvania working on prosocial AI and hybrid intelligence with a book that came out last year.
What was the title of that?
Human Leadership for Humane Technology, the New AI, Agency Ignited.
So, as we look at this, and I misspoke, I called it POZE. When we look at the social change from the inside out, right? That's really the POZE model. And I would direct some people to a very brief but very helpful YouTube video, if that's okay with you, Cornelia, if you like that video. I think it's very helpful. So if you go to www.youtube.com and you put in POZE, Social Change from the Inside Out by Cornelia Walther, you'll see there is a 5-minute video, and I think it takes you through the core. But why don't you talk a little bit about what POZE stands for, why it's so important, and how it's changing the individual's capacity for the use of hybrid intelligence?
Yeah, thank you. So POZE stands for Inner Peace in Haitian Creole, and it's actually what first participants of the courses say this is what gives it to them, so what they experienced. And then POZE just did stick, and it's afterwards when I became more interested in writing it down and making it something that can be replicated systematically and large scale, is that I realized it's also a very handy acronym for the 4 core components, which is the new perspective to life and living, the optimization of interplays, which leads to the gradual pursuit of successive zeniths, which then brings us to exposure to reality as it is and as it could be. And it's this new perspective of us as part of something that's bigger, but also ourselves as a multidimensional kaleidoscope that keeps on changing constantly and over time, which then changes the social environment that we're part of. which is changing as well. It's on the one hand giving us a more empowering perspective, I think, of ourselves, because it means that at any given time, the smallest change that you make that is aligned with your aspirations and your values can tick you into a new trend of a positive direction. But the second aspect to that is also that do matters in the social context that you are part of. So at no point in time, you can take a step back, take a side bystander perspective and say, well, it's happening to me, it's not happening with me, and maybe more importantly, it's happening also because of me. And that, I think, takes on an additional importance in the context of AI, which seems to be so overwhelming, and it seems to be driven by a couple of big players. But if we take this understanding, which for me underpins NI, so natural intelligence, then we start to have a new framing for HI, which is hybrid intelligence, and where we can systematically understand what is NI, our natural asset, and then harness AI in complementarity, not as a replacement.
So let me add something to this for our audience, because this can be a very high-level theoretical thing if you don't really, and I'll just say dummy it down. And I want the audience to get this right away. The thing that compelled me about Cornelia's thinking is we don't give enough attention to our hybrid intelligence. And our hybrid intelligence is going to be one of the biggest and most crucial skill for leaders. Because if, for example, you have the wrong individuals with very little emotional intelligence feeding the AI engine content that's going to be there forever and ever, then the context of that AI will never achieve the goals that you have planned for it, because the language that it may use could, in fact, prevent people from assimilating it. Or if the individual doesn't have the right emotional intelligence, it could actually create emotional stress and psychological unsafety for the individuals who are reading it and using it, which means it'll get less traction because it's not bringing people closer to the content. It's actually doing the reverse. So what Cornelia and I have been talking about and starting to write about is that hybrid intelligence, and she'll talk about this, it thrives at the intersection of multiple fields. But if an organization doesn't understand how to use that hybrid intelligence, and they don't have the right people with the right emotional intelligence contributing to the data sets that are going into AI, we're never going to achieve AI, because the EI that's necessary will not be a part of that formula.
So, Kat, that's so important what you're saying, and that's why I can see why you're excited about bringing in Cornelia. And so this hybrid intelligence, just to kind of clarify that, and then we'll ask about the prosocial EI, is that interplay between human natural intelligence and artificial intelligence. And Kathy, as you're saying, if we are entering, and we know about prompts, if we're entering prompts that aren't accurate or in line with things, it's like taking a wrong turn, and now we're down this road in this wrong turn, and we don't know how we got there. So Cornelia, is this idea of prosocial AI, what would you say are the biggest challenges leaders face in preserving this human agency, and practical steps that they can take to retain the autonomy of these AI tools, and they don't go down the wrong turn and think that's reality?
maybe two pieces to that. On the one hand, prosocial AI, for those who are not familiar with it, refers to AI systems that are tailored, trained, tested, and targeted to bring out the best in and for people and planet. When what makes them different from the traditional take on technology and innovation is that the first, second, and third industrial revolution were driven by commercial interests. And I think we can't leave it at that in this fourth industrial revolution, because AI and whatever comes next just has an impact on the human cognitive ability that is too far reaching. And hence, prosocial AI seeks to lobby for AI systems that are deliberately designed, delivered, and deployed with a prosocial connotation. And that, coming back to the second part of your question of agency, right now we're navigating a really dangerous transition from experimenting with AI towards relying on AI, towards depending on AI. And at some point, we'll reach the stage of full-blown addiction. Because something, I think that's important to remember, all of us on this call today, we have the luxury of growing up in a time and age where ChatGPT was not on our fingertips. The next generation does not have that. They will have the possibility of cognitive offloading everywhere. I don't know about you. I mean, I did grow up without a cell phone. I still remember the phone number of my grandmother that I remembered when I was 7 years old. Today, if I can remember otherwise my own phone number, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna take a quick break, Cornelia, because I remember when you couldn't go further than the cord on the phone, and that's why I call myself an OG of coaching. It's funny how we remember these things. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I think what would be good for our audience is to talk a little bit about AI literacy. We talk about agency, we talk about prosocial AI versus regular AI. And I want to make sure our audience is getting the discrete nuances of what this means. So don't go away. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. So we're talking with Cornelia Walther, and we're going to give you some of her contacts because she mentioned a bunch of her books, and it's like usually Kat and I are like, oh, wait a minute, which ones is that? So some of the latest book, what's the title of that
Human
latest book?
Leadership for Humane Technology, the New AI Agency Ignited.
And so the latest book, you can go to https and then link.springer.com blog. And there's a bunch of series of numbers. Like can they get that from linkspringer.com, or should I give them all the numbers that go with it?
I think if people just Google my name and
Okay.
Springer, they should get it, and they can get it both in English and in German.
Okay. And that is link.springer.com. And her latest
Or on
book.
Amazon, just put my name.
Yep. All right, great. So as we're talking about this in the prosocial AI, you've developed a framework like the A-frame, and I like that, both Kat and I like all our acronyms. So tell us a little bit about your A-frame framework, and how does that tie into integrating hybrid intelligence, what you're saying is the human natural intelligence, along with the artificial intelligence. So that combination.
Yeah, so the A-frame, and I apologize, I have an acute alliteration affinity, and the A-frame is a result of that. It is, and maybe just to tie this also back to what we said before about the twice four dimension of the POZE paradigm, which readers might or listeners might remember from aspiration, emotion, thought, and sensation. So the A-frame is anchored in that with awareness, appreciation, acceptance, accountability, awareness of who you are, appreciation of what makes you unique, but also appreciation of what are your artificial assets nowadays. Acceptance of the limitations, both of yourself and of your AI assets, and accountability. Because in the end, and I think it's important to remember that at every stage of our journey with AI, we, the human users, remain accountable for the outcomes. We should never reach that stage of delegation where we consider that, well, it's not my fault, it's ChatGPT.
Right.
And that is happening more and more, where the user is not reading, because the AI seems to be so sophisticated in the outputs, but that is very dangerous.
As you're talking here, I'm thinking of how the AI generated content creates something that looks so reliable and so comprehensive. But I notice now that whenever and I very rarely use this for developing content, because it is so flawed, but it always says at the end, please edit before sending. And I think that's pretty interesting. So it knows, and it's trying to be ethical, right? It's trying to have some level of efficacy. But in essence, people who don't have their own agency for ethics don't see the need to go in and qualify something that they believe has its own level of ethics and efficacy. And so they just push send. And if you don't review that content, it is so flawed that you can damage your own character. You can damage your own accountability. And it's very important for people to understand that this hybrid intelligence that we're starting to increasingly use is so valuable, but yet it is something that can really injure us. We have to have the social responsibility to apply AI. And I think these ethical guardrails, are so important. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how can people use these, A-frame, and then you have another one, M4 matrix. How can they use them to guide these ethical decision-making processes and to foster these prosocial outcomes?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of aspects that are very important in what you said, which is this aspect of it can be harmful for yourself if you just take at blind sight what ChatGPT is giving you. Because in the end, it's your own credibility and it's your own reputation that's at stake. ChatGPT doesn't care if it's good or not. But the other aspect is also that we're getting so used to it. And there are now more and more studies which show that the higher you give credit to the AI, the lower is the credibility and the credit that you give to your own NI. So there is a corresponding correlation that is not in our favor, and where we need to be acutely aware that we're in a transitioning stage. And I think the A-frame can help to keep us on our cognitive toes, so to speak, and to check in with ourselves and to remain aware of who we are without our tools and what makes us unique, but also to be mindful of our own limitations, including the fact that we like to walk the path of least resistance, and we're lazy. Let's face it. Humans are lazy in very many ways. And if we have an opportunity to avoid effort, and in particular cognitive effort, then we embrace that opportunity. And that, combined with ever more pervasive AI tools, is really, really dangerous. And so to harness HI, hybrid intelligence, which is arising only from the complementarity of NI and AI and goes beyond the either or, we need double literacy. So on the one hand, human literacy, a holistic understanding of self and society, and on the other hand, algorithmic literacy, not just how to do prompt engineering and what's the latest tool, but what are the limitations? What are the caveats? What are the risks?
So, Cornelia, I love what you're saying. Kat, you've heard me say this, and we've talked about this a lot. As humans, we don't like to think long or hard. And you talked about that with AI. Now it's addictive. And, Daniel Kahneman talked about fast and slow thinking. And slow thinking is that reflective time. Well, even prior to AI, he's saying we're only doing that about 2% of the time. And we operate on our habits and fast thinking. And I like to say, if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. And so what's going to happen, and this is interesting of what you're trying to do, nobody wants to be average. But with AI, it's promoting us on autopilot. And so what would you say, how do we make this easier for people? Like you said, how do we make really looking at the ethical issues and an appreciation, acceptance, and accountability, or maybe this is the M4, how do we make that easy or easier? I don't think it's easy because it's way too easy to just say what we got from AI and say that's it. So how do we get the effortful part, but how do we make the effortful part maybe easier for people to do?
So something, and that is actually drawing from what has worked beautifully well in the area of physical exercise, is what I call the cognitive high intensity interval training, and where you force yourself to first do some of the cognitive effort, and then you use your AI tools in assistance. but that means you have first done the legwork, you have done the critical thinking, and maybe most importantly, you have thought what you really, really want, because it's just too easy now to put some random fragmented thoughts into the chatbot, and then you get something back that is flourished, polished, and super sophisticated, but which is barely linked to in the first place. So the CHIIT, if you like, the cognitive high intensity interval training, is reversing that, where you're not using AI from the beginning, but in a second step.
When we look at what we can do as leaders in these organizations that are adopting AI at a very high rate, what are some of the things we can do to help our constituents, our teams, all of our players on the field increase their social responsibility and recognize the importance of emotional intelligence in the application of AI?
I think the A-frame is a really simple and good point of departure to curate your own awareness and to really build over time an understanding of the very personal implications of the interaction with AI and the final aspect of for the outcomes. Now, that is something personal, but which can be executed by anyone at every level of a hierarchy, which matters in particular, obviously, at the leadership level, but it matters for anyone, anywhere, because everyone contributes to the overall AI game, at least those who have internet. But tying this back to the M4 matrix, which looks at the micro, meso, macro, and meta, and individuals as part of communities or institutions, which are part of countries and the planet, it's putting everything that we're doing with AI in the social arena, and where we think or train ourselves to think more in terms of a domino chain. Because in a hybrid world, everything we do has ripple effects.
That ripple effect, is something that we don't give a lot of attention to. And navigating that ripple effect can really be very complex when we're using AI as an instrument of communication, and we're allowing AI to dominate the I'll just say enablement, right? I mean, we hear about training and we hear about individuals, receiving the automated messages. I mean, we all get them. I was standing in the airport the other day, and my plane was delayed multiple times. And what I found interesting were the messages were they were very dry, obviously, and they didn't take into account the distance that people had to go to change gates, right? So now you're standing at gate A and you get a message after 4 times that the plane has been delayed. First, you're told the delay, it'll depart at 2:38. Then it's delayed till 4:05. Now it's delayed till 6:47. And now when it's delayed to the last time, they also tell you stand by for a gate change, right? And people are starting that their anxiety is going up, for one. Number two, it's ethical, but it has no emotional connection whatsoever to allow a person who's receiving these to feel like they're getting any kind of relief. This thing is making decisions out of their control, but giving them no information. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if it said, thank you for your patience. We are waiting on repair people for an AC unit, a minor fix, something that gives people some psychological safety and some relief while they're standing there. And, for the first time last week, I saw a lot of people meditating in the airport over a period of time. Whole families sitting together in a circle with their legs crossed, holding hands, individuals sitting in their chairs with their eyes closed, their palms on their lap. So people are getting the fact that stress is just a normal thing. And I'm wondering, when are these organizations going to understand that the agency that they're responsible for in this hybrid intelligence community is going to require them to have much more sensitive messages than they're willing to operate with? I'd love your comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, a project that I wrote about and that I'm currently working on in 2021 is so in a way, a coach in the pocket. We spoke about that, Kathy, at some point. And I think it is something that could curate or help us curate this inner peace from the inside out. But what is really important, that it can be not a replacement of the journey that we need to undertake ourselves, because ultimately tools are just as good or bad as the humans that use them and the intent that underpins them. So I think especially when it comes to aspects like meditation or value orientation, the AI is a tool. It can't do the meditation for you. It might nudge you in certain circumstances to now start to meditate rather than locking every half second to your watch, or to be stressed out because it detects that your heart rate is going up or that your blood pressure is through the roof, or that your temperature is heating up. All of this can be detected and can trigger prosocial nudges.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, it's still the human being that then
Right.
needs to react to these
Yeah.
nudges
Yeah.
and implement them, which
Yeah.
is uncomfortable.
It is. And I'll tell you, we're going to take a quick break, but I just want to say this. I thought it was very interesting that the gate agent, who was an older Black man, sensed what was going on in this environment. And he got on the air and he was very sweet. He said, I notice many of you are looking at your watches, and I understand some of you are concerned. He said, so let's all take a deep breath together, and I'm going to count to 10. And he slowly counted 1, 2, 3. And then at 4, he said, let's all take a breath. And then he said, 6, 7, 8, let's all take a breath. And at 10, he said, now let's all relax and feel our muscles relax. And he said, I promise you, as I know more, you'll know more. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep. Don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, profiles and practices of top performers. And we're talking with Cornelia Walther. Her Gmail account or email is Cornelia C. Walther, Walther. And Cornelia, you got so many things happening. Say a little bit about kind of what you're working on now, and then maybe we'll zero in on some of the kind of the tools it seems like you're working on that may really help leaders.
Yeah, happy to. So my time at Wharton continues, but at the same time, I will also be going to Malaysia in the second half of this year to work with the Planetary Health Alliance and the Sunway University there on prosocial AI made in Malaysia, if you like, and to see how this is maybe something that can become a positive driver of a more respectful relationship between people and planet, and hence reverse some of the dramatic changes that have been happening in the climate space for too long. And the other aspect that could be of interest is that I will be working with the UN in Morocco on double literacy and the potential of human literacy and artificial intelligence literacy embedded in schools. Because I think the hybrid intelligence that we have been talking about on this show is something that needs to be trained from a very early age. And the current education curricula around the world are not really integrating the need to curate critical thinking, to create a holistic understanding of who we are, the societies that we're part of. So not only are we missing out on our NI, our natural intelligence, we're also not really ready for this hybrid world. And so I think we can seize the opportunity of the AI wave to take a step back, face our own humanity, and catch up on some of the gaps that have been haunting us in the past.
So what's an idea? How would you do that? And especially education, I'm interested in that. Like what would be the steps to do that, to catch up in the gap?
Integrating very practical tools about human literacy and algorithmic literacy in education curricula. Very simple. And it can be something to get started as simple as the A-frame, just to get a sense of it, and then build from there.
When you're looking to create content for all these wonderful assets that you contribute to, whether it's Forbes or Psychology Today, and now this array of books, what is it that is motivating you, and what is it that you are focused on when you are creating this content? So it's so rich and dynamic, and I'm sure it's very heady, right, for a lot of people who don't really get this deep into these subjects, but they are so important.
Well, I guess it's something that I've been thinking and working on for the past decade, more or less. So I guess the books that I began to write in 2019, they're kind of how my brain operates, and they are kind of the result of the question that I was left with after finishing my PhD. But how can we move beyond telling people what they have to do towards how can we curate the desire to become part of positive social change? And that question has kind of been driving me for the past many years, and led at some point to the books and also to this excitement with technology. And I think the main question that it all comes back to, and which might be a partial answer to your question about what's my motivation, is the why. And I think for me, that's maybe the big driver for me, but I think for many people is to take a step back and find out what's your why, which has nothing to do with technology.
Yeah. So your why, and that it sounds like your purpose of stepping back and we all are interested in getting on the AI train, but is it going to where we really want to go? And I love like your A-frame, because I think for Kathy and I and anybody with around emotional intelligence, it all starts with awareness, and what is it that you're aware of, and that automaticity we actually need to be aware of, kind of using the metaphor, we're now, the wrong road, wrong tracks. And so I think kind of stepping back and as I hear you saying, really looking at AI, doing the hard work ourselves, that cognitive focus, and then having AI kind of supplement, but then go back and review again, so that multiple steps on the front. What do you want? What's the vision? What's important? Where are you trying to go with that? As a research maybe piece with the AI to help, but then, really going back and looking at the quality and the editing of that.
Yep.
So, looking ahead, and a lot of people are starting to talk about 2030, right? It seems like that's the new target. We're looking at, I guess, across businesses for the development of leaders, for the development of pro-social AI-driven organizations. What can you give leadership in terms of some advice for how to navigate this new environment, this new mindset, these new literacies and skills that are necessary?
I would say to take a step back and put things into perspective, because I think it is very easy to be pulled into the AI wave and to try at all price to be part of it. And there have been many technology waves before this one. And I agree with those who say, oh, AI is very different. It is and it isn't. It's another tool, and humans just have an affinity for tools because we think they are quick fixes for all our woes. But let's also face it, we did not need AI to get us into some of the mess that the world is in today. Humans were really good at that. And that was human intent that has driven us in this direction. But it's also human intent that will get us out of it. So AI can help us on the journey to a better place, but it cannot get us to ticket, and it cannot travel for us. So especially when it feels like there are new tools coming in every day, and where it's easy to be swamped and feel completely overwhelmed and like you're always running behind, it might seem the gentleman at the airport that you mentioned suggested, and think, why does it matter? Why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to my team? Why does it matter to my company? And why does it matter to the rest of the world? Because I think this four-stepped why is putting things into perspective.
Yeah.
And then once you have that perspective, then you can move on to the second big question, which is what makes me unique? No matter how AI is going to become more and more sophisticated, what makes me as a human being, us as a team, us as a company, and us as a human species unique among AI? Not because of it, but with it.
Yeah.
But also in spite of it.
I love that emphasis, and Kathy would also relate to that, is just the idea of knowing your strengths, and that goes into some of the emotional intelligence, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you need to work on. So that the balancing, like the focus that you're having is really, very important, because you really do need to know yourself, and self-awareness is the start of all that. And then your question around the A-frames is one of those awarenesses is, what's my intention? What am I trying to do with this AI? What's my why? Where am I going with that? Versus going down the road too easily. You did mention something that I think our audience would be interested in. You talked about the coach in the pocket. And is that an application or a tool, or what is that?
Yes, so two things. One is the e-Socrates, which I wrote about in 2021, and which I have started now to prototype. Now that is the overall umbrella, but a very practical application that we have in the MVP stage ready for rollout this week is the coach in the pocket for caregivers of people with disability, the C4, which is the compassionate caregiver companion coach, and which is particularly tailored towards those who are helping and caring for individuals with a certain disability. And if any of the listeners out there are interested to test that and to become part of our first users, then please reach out.
And so say a little bit more, what does that do for the caregivers?
It gives them information, so access to quality knowledge,
Okay.
tools, and practices.
Uh-huh.
It's also connecting them to a wider caregiver community, because taking care of individuals can be very isolating.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's also connecting them to the service providers in their closer neighborhood and in the wider radar. And I nearly forgot the most important part. It's the coach in the pocket, because you can only take care of somebody else if you are taken care of, and if
Yes.
you learn how to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's closing the looping, and it's alleviating some of the risk of burnout, because in the caregiving business, it's so easy to keep on giving until nothing is left.
True.
Well, I think we're reaching that magical time here.
So yeah, I was gonna say let's do our little lightning round, because we just got enough time to hear from this. Um, so just fill in the blank, Cornelia. Leadership is
Inspiration,
okay. And at work, it's all about
curiosity,
okay, beautiful. And then this is a little more personal. What's the best way during the workday that you recharge? And it sounds like similar to, that care for self. What do you do to recharge?
I guess looking out of the window, taking a deep breath, and looking at the sky to put things into perspective.
That's great. All
You,
right.
we've had, I'll say, a very mind-bending conversation here around prosocial AI versus the AI development and deployment that everybody is, I guess, working with at this point, although I think many of us are becoming subject to AI. And it's moving a lot faster than many of us are, I want to say, recognizing, and we're just accepting it as opposed to questioning it, as opposed to recognizing our own need for hybrid intelligence to thrive in this new environment. And I want to thank you, Cornelia, for making us really think about it, to slow us down to think about it, because it's something, as you said, our brain doesn't want to do, and we really have to force it to do that. Again, people can reach you at Cornelia Walther at gmail.com. And thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And I know you had some bad storms there in Pennsylvania last week. I saw the aftermath in my daughter's neighborhood, so I hope you're safe and well. And Relly, I'll let you bring us to a close.
All right. Well, thank you, Cornelia. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Voice America. You've been listening to Leadership Development News. Continue to tune in.